Hey, welcome everyone. My name's Grant Asplund. I'm here again on another episode of CISO Talk, and I'm thrilled to be again with my good friend and colleague, Pete Nicoletti. He's the CISO in the field on the East. So, I was thinking of what I wanted to talk about today, Pete, and I saw a news story. It's been now fully 2 years, right? 24 months that we have had our entire world turned upside down. And I think it's fair to say the notion of remote work and remote work security has kind of been top of mind, top priority for a while. And so I guess what I'm wondering about, I call it memory. How much memory in the context of, like, if I had a really big fat rubber band and it was about that big around and I went and stretch it and I let go, it would have almost 100% memory, right? It would just go back to the way it was. How much memory are we going to have in the way we used to work compared to the remote workforce today?
It's gone. That analogy doesn't work anymore because we've transitioned and we're not going back. We're not snapping back. People have, and companies have recognized that there is gains of efficiency, that knowledge workers can be anywhere. Like today, as I mentioned in setting this up, here I am at Telluride. I've got out in Colorado, going to ski a little bit later this afternoon. I don't have to be locked in an office. Now, there's benefits of office work, of course, the camaraderie and the water talk, and
Sure.
people are really upset with the endless Zoom talks and the Hollywood squares, and
Yep.
but the efficiency gains have gone up.
Sure.
But while we've had efficiency gains, we've had a number of things. Companies have scrambled to support workforce, remote workforces, and during that scrambling, as with anything that you deploy, you miss things. You don't have security is sometimes not considered. It's like, hey, let's get the VPN up. Let's fire up a zero trust initiative. Let's get these things going, and we've scrambled to do these things. But we really haven't taken time was of the essence rather than the security of the tool. So
I think
we're seeing
the way I
big
call it,
bad statistics.
What I say is we all knew the target, digital transformation. We're all really right, and it really ended up becoming ready, fire, aim. Yeah. Right? I mean, everybody had to fire because but you were not even allowed to come back to work, right? So this notion of remote work was forced upon us, and I think there was a fair number that pulled that trigger before really making sure everything was safe and secure. You think that's a fair statement?
Yeah, the companion article that we've written to support this CISO talk is 57% of the organizations have their workforce working more than 2 days. But as we're pointing out here, the mad scramble to do that has left wide open things. I mean, think about it. We're seeing risks with companies that did it on the cheap are using BYOD, bring your own laptop, bring your own cell phone,
bring your own disaster.
And the statistics there are crazy.
Yeah.
We'll get to the statistics in a second. So companies that haven't deployed workforce management tools and endpoint tools, they're subject to, whatever their kids are surfing on their home networks. And the fact that home networks, they haven't changed their default passwords, they're insecure, they're not encrypted. A lot of companies are doing haven't even set up VPNs. They've just done it, with desktop shares and crazy, cheap free tools. And the statistics are terrible. The statistics, if you look at the number of attacks that are, first off, email's the number one vector. We know that 85% of
the killer app,
the killer app. And you're getting email at home. You're clicking on a link, and you're not having any type of URL protection. you're able to fill in your name and your password and whatnot without having any type of endpoint protection.
Yep.
And the statistics are terrible.
Well,
65% of new hacks are coming from the endpoint now.
That's it. And what I was going to say, Pete, is these significant trends for all of us that are, good intended employees that want to get our job done. This has had a huge impact, but this remote workforce model has had a pretty significant impact on the bad guys too, hasn't it?
It has. It's made their job easier. If you look at the statistics, the statistics are pretty bad. Even just look at the number of ransomware attacks and phishing attacks just since the Russian-Ukraine war. It's up 800%. Checkpoint Research is reporting an incredible amount of phishing attacks and disruptive type attacks coming from Russia. And if you don't have, endpoint tools where you can detect, you can stop ransomware attacks, you can quarantine the infected endpoint and then recover, most organizations, 75% of organizations don't have tools that can do all those things.
Yep.
And they're getting disrupted.
Yep.
They're having exfiltration events. It's crazy. I mean, just today, Okta announced a ransomware event. That's terrible. And then last week, look at Samsung and Nvidia.
Yep.
Here's companies that have budget and money to spend, but perhaps they didn't have a preventative strategy. They have the old school detective,
the detection strategy, right? So, you mentioned something earlier, Pete, that now I'm kind of tying together here, and that is, we all know BYOD, right? Bring your own device, which I refer to as bring your own disaster, because it is truly that. I always tell that it's kind of interesting when that whole phenomenon occurred was when the first iPhone came out, I believe. And what I mean is, every device was strictly controlled by IT. But then all of a sudden, Apple came out with a device that I bought, I took home. It says, do you know your email? It's like, yeah, I know my email. Okay. And now I'm getting corporate email on this device I just bought from my Apple store. That was when the genie got out of the bottle, and it's impossible to put it back in. But it leads me to the challenge organizations face as they've allowed this infiltration of personal devices. How do they enforce policy? I mean, are companies enforcing policy on personal devices? Are employees agreeing to have footprints from the corporate on a personal device? What's going on there?
Well, here's the way a lot of people do it. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
But here's church and here's state.
Right.
That's the way I call it. And I keep them completely separate. A lot of people don't want to carry two phones or carry two laptops. Well, I carry 3 laptops. That's my burden. But you're right, Grant. It's difficult. The initial driver, of course, was convenience and also cost. The companies perceived that the cost was lower if they just used, employees' devices and employees' laptops, employees' phones. Now they're realizing that the true cost, if you factor in incidents and the fact that it's millions of dollars, when you look at the companion article that we wrote for this, the studies out there show that incidents are not only increasing, but the cost to recover from them is not only more, but it's taking longer with remote workforces that don't have any kind of workforce security. And it's the issue is, now it's not that hard to do it. With the tools that Checkpoint has, the Harmony tools, protecting email and protecting the endpoint and protecting the users from doing dumb things. Here's a quick little example. Password reuse. Everybody does password reuse. Nobody has a password for every single site.
Yep.
Well, I do. But most normal people don't.
Right.
And, when I was at CISO of my last gig, the Ashley Madison breach occurred. And so I downloaded the passwords and the names, and there was 200 employees that had used, and then I filtered it against their AD passwords. 200 employees use their corporate email and their corporate password in the Ashley Madison hack. So it's completely exposed. Any hacker with that, a child hacker could have taken those credentials, logged into the network, and had access to everything that they did. And unless you have endpoint tools that prevent dumb end users that aren't thinking of reusing their credentials and or clicking on links and or filling out forms with proprietary information or leaking proprietary information, unless you have those tools in place. And the other thing, Grant, the costs have come way down. It's a competitive marketplace. The way you have to select these tools, though, is kind of interesting. You got to go to the MITRE reports.
Yep.
And if you look at anyone that's is selecting these tools, they have to look at these third-party reports. Gartner has them. MITRE has them. I think MITRE is really the best. It's the most technical. And look at the endpoint tools and the reports of what they're stopping. And if they're not stopping near 100%, you're going to be dealing with incidents. So there's some advice right there.
It is pretty amazing how, this teeter-totter of endpoint now, the endpoint has become so critical, obviously, because of this remote workforce trend. And I think also the fact that we've got, unbelievably high bandwidth connection 24/7, 365 to a supercomputer all the time. That also exacerbates the challenges to keeping these remote supercomputers secure, especially when people, as you just clearly described, do foolish things. So,
yeah, it's a tough balance between convenience versus security.
Yeah.
You have to make sure this all is managed in the background and it doesn't impact your day. Otherwise, you get complaints, and then people try to deinstall it and try to. So the tools that you use have to work cleanly. They have to install cleanly. They have to be managed cleanly. And then when there's a problem, you need to have a single pane of glass to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that customers, our customers, really appreciate.
Instead of the whack-a-mole, right?
Instead of the whack-a-mole and the chair swivel,
right,
and the login of multiple tools. You have to have your endpoint integrated with your firewall, integrated with your zero trust initiative, integrated with your cloud protection. And if you don't have that single pane of glass, your troubleshooting and your help desk is going to be it's going to be painful, not only for how long the tickets take to resolve, but when there's a serious issue, it's going to take a long time to resolve.
And it really speaks, doesn't it, Pete, to the way the world is today. We are all hyper-connected. And the fact of the matter is, this supercomputer that I bought is connected to every one of the same resources my personal computer that I got from my company is connected to, right? And I think that's the issue, right? That the notion of endpoint, really, we're all endpoints, very active endpoints. That's why the emphasis seems to have went there so much, and I think rightfully so. But
there's so many attack vectors. Look at SharePoint, look at Teams. It's not just email. It's not just your SaaS applications, but it's all your collaborative tools as well.
All the interconnected stuff. So how can organizations immediately improve their security today, maybe without having to go and spend money? And then what else they might be able to do? And then I'll want to wrap this up because we don't want to drag on too long.
Sure. So the first thing to do is to get your employees' passwords in order. Make sure that they're not doing password reuse. Try to recommend a password manager that pops in strong passwords. Passwords are in the future, it's all going to be our face. It's going to all be biometrics. But until we get to a passwordless society, we've got to make it convenient, and we've got to make it strong, and we've got to make it to where the end users can follow a policy that's pretty straightforward. So that's the quickest thing if you don't want to spend any money. Now, if you want to spend some money and you want to prevent incidents, that's when you get into these enterprise grade, centrally managed tools,
Yep.
where the administrators select a tool, the tool is deployed with a couple of clicks. You've got certificates being deployed out to the end user to make sure that your communication is encrypted and protected. That if for example, a lot of people don't know anything about jailbreaking. And if I have physical access to your phone, I could jailbreak it in 5 minutes, install malicious files on it, and you wouldn't know about it.
Yep.
In a normal sense. If you don't have an endpoint protection tool, you have no way of protecting against malicious files, malicious jailbreaks.
Yep.
And the app stores. We've seen hundreds of cases
Yep.
where the app stores are not scanning their apps well enough, and malicious apps are being downloaded. And without an endpoint tool to prevent that from occurring or recognizing it when it does occur, you're going to have a data exfiltration or
Yep.
ransomware or an outage or some type of a disruptive, costly event.
Right.
So there's no excuse for it these days.
Yeah, best
Endpoint
practice,
security
right?
is,
I mean,
yeah,
there's really, it always seems to go back to that practice, good hygiene, practice good password management, all the things that, at a very fundamental level can get you miles ahead in keeping you protected. And I think we sometimes maybe get lazy, but I think all words of wisdom, really great. I always enjoy talking with you, Pete. It's fun talking to a guy who's sat in the seat for a number of years and really gets it. So thanks very much for taking time to talk on this CISO Talk. And ladies and gentlemen, get your endpoints strengthened, bolstered, get them improved.
Grant, thanks for the invitation. It's a simple thing to fix. Reach out to a Check Point partner. The partners out there are going to be able to help you. Reach out to Check Point Direct. We have a ton of resources. We have a new SMB launch where we have for smaller businesses that have this same issue. We now can offer enterprise grade security to those smaller companies that don't have
huge.
administrators. And of course, we also have the whole MSSP practice. So if you don't have 24/7 resources, you can reach out to Check Point or our partners, and we're going to be help you there. And Grant, I always enjoy your insightful questions. And the next session we're going to do is on parental guidance, because as both parents, we know we had setting up this call. We had a lot of fun time.
Yeah, it was a good
that.
talk.
So that's our next session. Grant.
Okay, that's a deal, man.
Always enjoy chatting with you, man.
I always enjoy talking with you, Pete. Thank you very much. CISO Talk is a great. I really think it's just a great little session where we get to have some very good conversations that I think are germane to the world and what people are up against. And so, thank you very much. I'm Grant.
Check out the companion article we wrote that
good
has.
point.
Yeah.
So
check that out.
I think we'll have a link, or they'll do something to make sure you get it. So, Pete Nicoletti, thank you so much, buddy. I really appreciate it.